How you doing, Professor Sari? This is Angel. I'm doing this on my phone right now. I didn't mean to do it on my phone, but I just couldn't get it to work on the computer there. So I guess we'll for time's sake, we'll just get on with it. I wanted to do my report on the history of child abuse. Now we're gonna start with logistically speaking, what child abuse is at I have it right here next to me. Is that a minimum any act or failure to act on the part of a parent or a legal guardian, which will result in death or serious physical injury to the child, physical harm, emotional harm, etc., etc. Sexual abuse and any type of exploitation is added into this, but it's obviously just a severe. Each state gives its own real definition as to what they would consider abuse, but in general, there's about four standard accepted types of abuse, and these are physical abuse, emotional, sexual, and neglect. Now, physical abuse, they don't count physical discipline as in spanking your child or using the belt on them to a certain extent, as long as there's no bodily harm, no visible marks or anything of that nature. As long as it's a disciplinary act, then they say it is fine. Neglect any failure to not provide them with the necessities of life, food, water, even education, not providing them the right education, not letting them express themselves. The emotional abuse can be just making them feel like they're nothing. Maybe they're below you or they're below life. Just destroying their self-esteem. And the sexual, I don't want to get too much into that, but obviously, and anything that adults would do and children shouldn't do that an adult would do to said child. Now, earlier, like back in the day, early 1800s, this is there was almost no protection for children. There was really nothing they could do. The common law basically was that the man is the king of the house. He gets to dictate what's right or what's wrong. This also branched on to the females, so they were also under this umbrella of the man. So the child was stuck as, my father is it. He is the judge, jury, and executioner. So it was there were legal aspects to it that his job was to give them food, water, shelter, and such. But when it came to discipline, he had basically full reign. Not to the point of killing or anything like that, but still in general, marks and all that was basically acceptable. It was really the benchmark of it was really dependent on what the community thought. It was whatever the community really thought was acceptable is what was acceptable back in the day. Yeah, they're just doing execution. All right, so now we move along a little bit. Industrialization and urbanization take place, and now we have the more poor working class families that are raising their children under these hellish circumstances that you couldn't imagine, and these children are put into right front and center. The abuse is put right front and center for the world to see, and now people are starting to realize what is really going on, and this is when reformers really start to take action, and they basically their philosophy is that we don't really care what you're in terms of the parent. They don't really care what the parent's issue was, or what kind of problems they were dealing with. If the child was being neglected in any way, that was an issue, and that issue needed to be addressed. And therefore, during this time, a lot of parents were losing custody of their children based off of the fact that they were being neglecting their children out of not so much spite, but out of the fact that they just really couldn't provide for them. Like most of the children would become orphans, and it's not because the parent was bad necessarily speaking, but because of the environment that they were in, they really could not deal with the aspects, the outside world, and whatever. And statistically speaking, this has been true that most violence in terms of children leading to a life of crime or violence or whatever is because their parents, the people who raised them, either A, are already involved in that type of crime, violence, gangs, or whatnot, or B, they just didn't have that figure because they were too destitute, they were too poor, they couldn't afford the basic necessities of life, and they needed something to grasp onto. I think I said this in a previous question. I answered this when we spoke before, that they needed some kind of family figure since they didn't really have one because of the situation that they were in, and they grasp onto gangs. And so you can almost say, in a way, child abuse or neglect can very well lead to an acceleration of violence in children. Let me see, where was I? I kind of lost track there for a second. Okay. So now we're gonna go to 1870, because this 1870, as I was actually fascinated by this. 1870 is when things really started to pick up and change, because there was a case of this girl named Mary Ellen Wilson. I hope I said that right. She was being beaten, whipped, what have you, daily in a foster home, and this came to light. And at the time, there were no organizations to aid someone like her. So the ASPCA, or the animal, it's an animal group for the protection of cruelty from of animals, had to stand up, and they argued that there's no reason that we should have a group and all these laws trying to protect animal rights, for animal cruelty, and have nothing for children, for human beings. That's ridiculous. So they brought that up, and what happened is that the foster mother of the girl, Mary Ellen, she ended up getting off easy. She got about a year in prison, but this created an outrage, and soon more organizations were being put out there to aid child abuse. I have one here. I forget what. Let me see. The New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. This is one of a few that came to light to aid this, in child abuse. And now sometime after that, in about the mid-90s, there were statutes that states just started throwing out statutes. The mandatory reporting statute, which required professionals like doctors and teachers and such to report on any abuse that they may see or that may be prevalent. It doesn't necessarily have to be that they absolutely know it's abuse, but if it's relevant and they think that it might be, they had to report it. Unfortunately, abuse still occurs today, and a lot of it sometimes is related to drugs, and it may not get better, but I think over the years we could find a way, but it's gonna take a while. I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you so much for your time, and goodbye.